morning, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here as I organize myself. Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you all. And thank you, Des, for that lovely song, Life is Change. I want to thank Carol and Dory for leading us in the prayer as well. And Marjorie, I want to thank you for this new mask. I kind of feel invincible with it. So let's see, where do I want to begin? I guess I'll begin with the title because that's a good place to start and deviate from. So the title of my talk today is Wonder, Wonder Everywhere. And I love this because it sits with something that one of my spiritual heroes, Rabbi Abraham Heschel, says, where he says that there are two ways of knowing things, through reason, and reason is how we simply put into context what we already know, or amazement. Because amazement or surprise or wonder leads us to insight. And what I know is the divine is always expressing itself through wonder and amazement because, if I would say one thing that I have learned on my entire spiritual path, it is this thing that I call God, this divine presence that lives in and through and as all things, is always moving in one direction, and that is forward. And is always creating what is new. That is true for me, it's true for each and every one of us here. What I want to offer as I'm getting in my talk here is just a couple things to consider. And the first is this, is that each and every one of us is designed for change. In fact, I would even offer that as a mantra or an affirmation to say, I am designed for change. Because if you think about it, even from a biological point of view, my ancestors, your ancestors, hey, they were the fastest, the smartest, and they had the best immune systems. So here we are. We stand in a lineage of those who have moved and evolved and continued to do so, and that we're all designed for change. So I've been thinking, there's this line from Emily Dickinson where she says, not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. So let's just kind of breathe that in because, as Marjorie said, we're in a time of uncertainty. But, this is how evolution happens. It is learning and it is adjusting as we are learning and adjusting. And the way that we continue to experience this and thrive in this is to stay agile, to be filled with amazement, open to surprise, and not knowing when the dawn will come, we open every door. So one of the things that I am opening this year is a tradition that is in the science of mind and spirit since I have been in it for the last nearly 30 years. And it is this, that every January, the Science of Mind and Spirit centers that I sort of grew up in, the first one where I sort of washed up on the shore and have since, moved through, has been one thing, and that is this. Every January, we kind of go back to the basics. And generally, it's the four principles that are in the introduction in the Science of Mind and Spirit: the thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. So, that to me is the wonder and amazement of all things. And so, I have read these principles, studied these principles, but again, not knowing when the dawn will come and opening every door and opening myself to amazement and wonder, it's a joy to sort of dive back into these principles new, but also for the first time. And so here's my thought. What is this thing we call the thing itself? It's that divine, loving principle that that intelligence that, as Thomas Troward says, sleeps in the stone, stirs in the plant, awakens in the animal, and becomes conscious in the human. It's that loving and living presence itself. It's intelligence. But here's the trick about it, is that it reveals itself to us in the symbols, the myths, the language, the perception of our own individual beingness. Father Richard Rohr says this. He says, your image of God creates you. You become the God you worship. If your God is an eternal torturer, then torture is validated. If God is the image of a king, then we all want to be kings. If God is love and relationality, that creates a very different kind of humanity. And so that's what I'm sitting with, is this presence of love. If I can, if you can, if we can begin to change our perception to the perception of love, that intelligence, consciousness, this evolving presence, even in the midst of things, as Emma Curtis Hopkins says, do not be deceived by the appearance of things, because intelligence is there, and it's learning, and it's novel, and it's agile, and it is the life that is living each and every one of us. There is an old occultist that I love. Her name is Dion Fortune. She was a British woman alive in the early part of the 20th century, and wrote several books. But one of the things that I love is there's this book that's called The Magical Something of Britain. It's a memoir of hers. But she talks about how she was approached by the British government during the Second World War. And the British government asked her if she would contact all the people that were her students and part of her own spiritual community, and they were to pray and meditate and hold a level of consciousness to do two things. One was to literally create a shield over the British Isles. And they were meditating and praying, and this was before the internet or the phones weren't working. All their communication was done by mail. But they were holding this consciousness. The other thing, of course, is the British government knew that the fascists were also some of the higher echelons and then were students of the occult. And so they wanted to get an up on this. But Dion Fortune's group did this throughout the war, and she was approached one time and she was asked, when will this end? And she says, I can't tell you when it will end, but I can tell you how it will end. It will end when the conditions that created this have been resolved. And that's a great metaphysical truth, because whether we as a nation or a world are struggling with something here and we're trying to make sense of it, we may not know when it's going to end, but we know how it's going to end. It will end when the conditions that created it have been resolved, whether that be because of a pandemic or climate change or political upheaval. What is behind the thing. But that's true for each and every one of us too. So maybe you are dealing with something large or small. Maybe it's something that is really challenging you, or perhaps it's simply annoying you. And you're wondering, when is this going to end? It will end when the conditions that created it are resolved. And what that tells me is that it's not about what's happening at the external, it's about what's happening at the internal level. Because what we know as metaphysicians is that which we experience on the outside has a direct correlation to what we are perceiving, what we are experiencing on the inside. And so if we want to change the outside, we do so by working on the inside. And this is This is timeless wisdom. This is absolute timeless wisdom. Even though our founder of our particular teaching, Ernest Holmes, talks about this idea of perception and understanding it very similar to Richard Rohr, he says this. He says, we can only see it by looking at it through our own eyes. Hence, we shall find a better God when we have arrived at a higher state of humanity. And so how we begin to perceive it is how things begin to work. But something that I'm sitting with is how timeless this teaching really is. I'm reading right now The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. And it's one of those pieces of sacred literature that when you read it, not only does it sort of rewire your brain, but it works at the level of soul. So I'm in the section of the Commedia called the Mount Purgatory, and it's this whole ascension of moving from the inferno into paradise. But there's this area of healing that begins to happen, that all of us happen to. So without getting too far into it, about the middle, maybe the 17th canto, there's this really interesting thing, because Dante first, he starts talking about love. And he talks about love as ordinate and inordinate love. What I think that means for each and every one of us is that how we love the wrong things, or how we love the right things wrongly, or how we love the right way. And let me take this a little bit further by something else that he says. Because in this literature, one of the characters in it speaks to him and says this: time is love. Time is love. Ponder this for a second. What does he possibly mean? What he is saying is, the thing we spend time with is the thing we love. And the thing we love is what we become. So we love what we become, and we love what we spend the most time with. So again, my question is, what do you spend the most time with? In thought, in fantasy, in imagination, in study, in conversation. What are you plugged into? Because that is what we are becoming. Dr. Holmes says this too. He says, in this life, we don't get what we want. We get what we become. And we become the thing that we spend the most time with. And there's something else that he talks about that we as metaphysicians understand too. And it is this, is that what he talks about is what happens when we love something is that we invite it in, and it creates an image within our own mind that we become captivated with. And so consciously and unconsciously, we are organizing our life around this image within our own mind. Are you with me on this? Because, again, there are some things that we say, I don't really love that. I don't love what's happening in the news. And yet we spend how many hours a day watching it, reading it, Twittering it, social mediaing it. I don't love what's happening politically. I don't love what's happening socially. And yet I spend a whole lot of time there. So at some level, it is this inordinate thing, right? I'm loving something perhaps I shouldn't. And what we understand in mental science is this, is something that the Buddhists talk about, which is mental hygiene. Mental hygiene is watching or guarding our consciousness as to what we become infatuated with. And it's kind of like this. Imagine, if you would, that you're home and someone is knocking on the door. And you open the door, and your screen door, of course, is locked because that's wise. And there's somebody there. And they're asking if they can come inside. And so this is exactly what Dante is talking about with his companion Virgil. Because the question is, do I allow this person, do I allow this thought, do I allow this idea to cross the threshold of my consciousness? And what Dante suggests for us is that reason, memory, imagination, these can sort of be the sentinels that guard the threshold of our consciousness. Because oftentimes, I don't know about you, but I can easily get distracted by something. And the next thing I know, I'm carried away with this thing. And the next thing I know, I'm just going off. I see this to myself all the time. There's this on the way to the gym that I work out at, or haven't been lately because of the mask mandate. But on the way there's this area on the road there that is a spot that people like to take photographs with. And I got to tell you, 9 times out of 10 when I drive by this thing, there's somebody getting a photograph, a quinceañera, a wedding, a baptism. I don't know what they are, but they're all dressed up and they've got cameras in front of them. And I find myself often, not so much these days, but often, driving by them and having this conversation in my head about what they should be doing, how they should be dressed, what color they should be doing, or something like it's any of my business at all. And yet there my mind goes. And the next thing I know, I've got, wait a minute, come back. Because, I don't want that to cross the threshold of my consciousness. First of all, because it's none of my business. Second of all, because there's nothing I can do about it. Third, because there are so many other things I can be considering, like the beauty of the day or the car in front of me, or whatever the case may be. But all of us have these things, right? Where we, that little mind that says there is no little mind, that little voice that says there is no voice, all of a sudden is giving us a commentary on something that has absolutely nothing to do with us because we've let it cross in. And the challenge is, if we're not paying attention to it, then it creates an image in our mind that we become captivated by. And so again, to live in this world of amazement and wonder is to practice this thing called mental hygiene. Because the bottom line is, the way the thing works is becoming the thing that we love. And so, where do we give our energy? The teachings of Jesus says this amazing thing where he says, where your heart is, so lies your treasure. It's the exact same thing. The thing that you love is the thing that you are becoming, because it's the most important thing to you, consciously or unconsciously, what's good for you or not good for you, ordinately or inordinately. And so, how do we practice this? So I heard this quote the other day. Actually, it's one of the practitioners at the center where I am this week, or where the center that I'm at this week. It's the reading for that. And I've heard this reading attributed to the Buddha. I've heard it attributed to Mahatma Gandhi. And frankly, I don't know who first said it, but it's wise. And I'd like to share it with you in this level. It's this: your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habit. Your habits become your values. Your values become your destiny. So, in essence, our perception, our thoughts become our destiny. This is Metaphysics 101. So if we think about it, what is this thing itself? It is this divine presence, this intelligence that lives in and through and as all things. And what we as metaphysicians understand is that this presence has invited us to co-create with it, to become part of the evolutionary experience that is going on. As Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says, he says this: the history of the living world can be summarized as the elaboration of ever more perfect eyes within a cosmos in which there is always more to be seen. This is the thing itself. And how does it work? Thoughts are causative. Thoughts are causative. And by directing our thought to an idea like, I am designed for change, there is an intelligence within me that guides me, that surprises me, that lures me into my highest good. As I am doing this, I am loving that, I am becoming that, I am changed, and I am changing the world. So my blessings to each and every one of you. Thank you for being in this virtual world with each and every one of us. I send you many, many blessings. I look forward to the time that we are here together, and so it is.